So I've got some slides that I'm going to share and walk you through the new relief programs and just to keep things moving on a reasonable pace. What I'd like you to do is enter your questions into the chat box as we go. And Emily, if you'll help me keep an eye on those and admit anybody who's coming into the meeting late. And then as soon as I get to the end of the slides, we'll start back at the top of the questions and we'll run through all those questions until we run out of time or everybody runs out of coffee and is too exhausted to keep going. So I'm gonna, so the order today, I'm gonna start with just a couple of top level observations about who I think gets help in the new relief programs and who doesn't. And then I'm gonna run through basically everything that was changed or added in the new relief bill. And then I'm going to do a deep dive into Paycheck Protection Program. It's likely that y'all are going to need additional support on the employee retention credit, which I'm going to mention today, but that's going to be a separate webinar. It was just too much to fit in at once. So the focus in the deep dive today is going to be the Paycheck Protection Program. All right. So the businesses that are going to benefit from the new law are people that weren't eligible for PPP1 because of business type. In Macon, I can think specifically about the Chamber of Commerce and Visit Macon, who were excluded from the first round of PPP. So there is an expansion of business types that can now apply for the first version of the Paycheck Protection Program. The next one is anybody who got the Paycheck Protection Program the first time around, and this is going to be the easiest type of business to help, but somebody who got the Paycheck Protection Program the first time around and things still aren't back to 100% and you could use some additional support. Another category of business that's going to be helped is, if you remember, there was supposed to be a $10,000 advance on the economic injury disaster loan, and that was a grant, but it ended up getting limited to only $1,000 per employee. So if you're one of those businesses that got less than $10,000, you're going to be able to round up to $10,000 now. So that's going to be a benefit. Another type of business that's going to benefit is if you, I hope there aren't too many people out there, because we were pretty insistent that if you're eligible for relief, you need to take it. But I know there are a few of you that did not take an economic injury disaster loan when it was available, and then the application period expired. Well, you're going to be able to take one now, and I think you should. The next group of businesses is if you run a venue that was shuttered. I know that's a really niche thing, but if you have a public performance venue that hasn't been able to work because of the statewide limitations on gatherings, then you're going to get additional support. And then this is mistyped, but if you're continuing to operate, but your revenues are only 80% of what they were and that they were down 20%, you're going to get support too. So here's the bad stuff. And I know this impacts some of you who are on the call, but who doesn't get help? You weren't in business on February 15th of 2020. I don't know what to tell you. That really sucks. For most of you who opened close to the start of the pandemic or even during the pandemic, you were working on your business a year in advance and you had no choice but to open when you did. But the new relief law only provides help for businesses that were open in February of 2020. The other category that's not going to get help is you got PPP1, but you didn't experience a quarterly or annual decline in revenue of at least 25%. The other category is if you already got the full 10,000 EIDL advance, you're not going to be able to round up on that. And if you already took the EIDL loan, those have not been expanded or renewed. It's still what you got's what you got. And if you have more than 500 employees. So those are some general guidelines about who's going to get help and who's not. So that should help you figure out what you need to pay attention to in the rest of this slideshow that might help your business. So the new COVID-19 business relief, new types of businesses are eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. If you didn't apply before for PPP1, you get a second chance. you've got to take advantage of these programs. Some businesses are eligible for a second round of PPP2, and more money is available for EIDL. And then live theaters, museums, and zoos have a special grant program just for them that's not PPP 1 or 2. There are also some improvements to previous relief. New expenses are eligible for forgiveness for PPP borrowers. I'm going to go over those. You get additional flexibility for the covered period to calculate forgiveness. We had a lot of trouble with this the first round of PPP. Those of you who are on the calls, the guidelines on how to get forgiveness kept changing and expanding. They've been extremely permissive this time. So if you're continuing to operate, you should be able to get forgiveness really easily. And then PPP loans up to $150,000 have a guaranteed simple one-page forgiveness application. So that is going to be a huge improvement. There's no ambiguity left around what you have to fill out to get forgiveness. And then this was another quirk the first time around. If you got that EIDL advance, that 10 grand or $1,000 per employee, whatever it was, you had to subtract that out of your PPP loan for forgiveness. You no longer have to do that. You're going to get to forgive all your PPP and all the EIDL advance. And then maybe the last thing that's really significant is they've guaranteed that the benefits from these programs are not taxable. So if using these programs drove you into profitability where you would be facing tax consequences, they've guaranteed that those are not taxable consequences now. And then the last thing, and I've got another slide about this, but it improves and expands the employee retention tax credit. So first-time PPP eligibility. There aren't too many of you to whom this applies, but the previous PPP program was restricted to for-profit businesses and nonprofits that were under 501c3, only C3. All the other organizations under 501c are now eligible. So it's chambers of commerce, visitors bureaus. You still have to have fewer than 300 employees, and you can't have a significant number of lobbying expenses. I don't see that impacting any of our local organizations. So this is a big deal because our Visitors Bureau and Chamber here are struggling just as much as any of the other nonprofits and needed relief from this program. So now they're going to be able to apply. This is probably the piece that is going to affect the most of you, and that is PPP2, the second round of PPP. What this is going to give you is a second allocation of PPP. It is the same amount for most businesses. It'll be 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, up to a maximum of $2 million. For hospitality businesses, they are going to get 3.5 times their average monthly payroll. So for our restaurants, bars, we have 77 of them downtown. You're going to get the 3.5 time multiplier on your average monthly payroll for a second award. The only thing that you really need to know about this is you still have to guarantee to your lender and the SBA that this funding is necessary for the business to continue to operate. You also have to have fewer than 300 employees, although there are some exceptions. If any of you are running, so if you're in these exception categories, I want to keep this slideshow focused for the maximum value, but talk to us and we can help you figure out if you're on that cusp, if you can still qualify. Again, you have to have been in business on February 15th of 2020. And here's the real kicker. You had to have had a 25% reduction in gross revenue in any calendar quarter comparing 2019 to 2020. So some of you may have fiscal years that don't line up with the calendar. NewTown's, for instance, our fiscal year ends June 30th. It doesn't matter. The law is very specific that it's calendar quarters. So we're talking January, February, March, right? You got to look at calendar quarters, 2019 to 2020. You do get to exclude any relief that you received and was forgiven during those time periods. So the next program is the grant program for venues. Live venue operators who are open on February 29th of 2020, they've got to show a 25% reduction in revenue any quarter 2019 to 2020. The grant is equal to 45% of gross revenues from 2019, up to $10 million. So you can see if you're a museum, a theater, a concert venue, or even a promoter for one of those things, you're going to be way better off taking advantage of this grant program for venues than you would be for PPP, because it's based on gross revenue. It's almost half your gross revenue for the whole year. And the standard to qualify is the same, but you can only get one or the other. Now, here's the real kicker. This is a finite amount of money in the grant program for venues. And the first round is going to venues with a 90% decline, right? So I told you, you only have to have that 25% decline in a quarter to apply. But they're going to do this in successive rounds, with one at 90%, one at 80%, one at 70%. And the fund may well be exhausted by the time they get down to your venue if you don't have a massive decline in revenues. Now, for most of these venues, they've been completely shuttered. So for most of these businesses, they're going to be able to put in that first round at the 90% decline. The money that you receive for this still has to be used for operating expenses, payroll, rental, utilities, mortgage, that kind of stuff. And it cannot be used with PPP2. I mentioned that already. You have to pick one or the other. Generally, though, if you can qualify for this one, it's going to provide a larger amount of money. The EIDL changes, they've extended the deadline to apply for EIDL that had previously closed. It's now open again, so you've got a second shot. If you did not apply for EIDL the first time, you've now got to the end of 2021 to apply. Businesses in low-income communities like downtown Macon, if you didn't get that advance, you can round up. I mentioned that already. So for all our downtown businesses, if you did not get the full 10,000, if you only got a certain amount for your employees, you're going to be able to round up. That application is not live yet, and we'll let you know when it is. But that should be, I mean, it's valuable money for several of you. If you're sole proprietor, I know you got $1,000. If you have 2-3 employees, you got $2,000 or $3,000. We've already talked to a number of organizations where, you know, it's going to be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 in additional grant money. It'll be really significant. So the employee retention tax credit, it's available for businesses that experienced a 20% decline in revenues for the first 2 quarters of 2021 rather than the same quarter of 2019. And it will pay up to 70% of wages per employee, up to 10 grand per quarter, and you can use it for the first 2 quarters. So that's up to 10 grand per employee per quarter. That could be 20 grand per employee. That's a huge amount of money. And you can use it with PPP 1 and 2. One of the big things that we were talking about the last round of stimulus was that you had to pick one or the other between the employee retention credit and PPP, and several of you picked one or the other. Well, now you can go back and pick up whichever one you didn't do. So that's a really big deal. And you can do the same thing for the first 2 quarters of 2021. You can do both PPP2 and ERC. So again, we're going to have another webinar specifically about ERC probably next week. But that's a really good thing. So right now, if you're eligible for PPP 1 and 2, you really don't have to, the only thing you have to worry about is if you are a theater or a venue. If you're not a theater or a venue, you can go ahead and apply for PPP 1 and 2 without endangering your employee retention credit. So that's why we're not taking a deep dive on it right now. You really don't have to worry about this right now. You can go ahead and do your PPPs, and then we'll come back and help you do your ERCs later. Okay, so some of you do have SBA loans too. This is a little bit niche, but if you have a SBA loan, which is a 7A, a 504, and or a microloan from the SBA, SBA is going to pay your principal and interest for 3 months, starting in February of 2021, up to 9 grand a month. They will make your whole payment on your loan. It's huge. So, I mean, this is, if you have a loan on a building, they're actually going to help you build equity by making those payments for you. Hospitality businesses get the same deal for 8 months. Huge deal. And it's not just people who have existing loans. So if you can qualify and close a new SBA loan before 9/30 of 2021, you get the first 6 months of principal and interest paid, and you get them to pay for the next 6 months. If you pay for the next 6 months, so They pay your first 6 months. You pay the next 6 months. You get another 3 to 5 months of principal and interest paid after you make 6 months of payments. And the 3 to 5 is, again, the difference between a non-hospitality business and a hospitality business. And then they've also increased the way this whole SBA program works is it's still run through private lenders. It's not normally direct government loans. But what the government says is if you make loans based on the criteria that we've published, we're going to pay the losses if you generate any. They've increased the amount they're going to pay to 90%. So now SBA lenders have very, very little risk in making these loans. And so because of that increased guarantee, it ought to be easier for you to get a loan. So if you've ever thought about getting an SBA loan, these are huge incentives where they're going to make the whole payment on the loan for you. And now would be a really good time to pursue getting that closed before September. There are also some improvements to pandemic unemployment. The total unemployment eligibility has had 11 weeks added to the end so that there's now a total eligibility of 50 weeks. And it adds a federal benefit of $300 a week on top of state benefits. And all you got to do to qualify for these programs is continuing to file for unemployment the same way you always have. The state unemployment system is going to work out those additional benefits and pay them without you doing anything. There's also a $300 a week for gig workers. Most of you know gig workers aren't eligible for state unemployment at all. So there's really zero available for them. But now they can apply through pandemic unemployment for this $300 a week federal side. And they've even tuned up for people who are doing both. People who have qualifying wages that would get state unemployment, but also have gig work that wouldn't. They're eligible for a $100 a week supplement on top of their state benefits for their salaried work. I actually, James, I'm interested if you heard, but I actually heard people are starting to get this federal. We expected this not to be available for a long time, but I think they're actually starting to pay the $300 supplement already. So I want to just give you a quick chart summary, and I should have gotten, I'll pop a link to this slideshow into the text right before we go into the Q&A so you can come back and look at this. But you've got to have these reductions. The 25% calendar quarter 2019 to 2020 is going to qualify you for PPP2 or the venue grant. If your revenues are 80%, which is a 20% reduction, I don't know why they were at the law that way, and I should have switched them all back to 20%. But if you have a 20% reduction from 19 to 21 in any quarter, you're going to qualify for the new ERC. And then that EIDL bonus to round up to $10,000 is a 30% decline in any contiguous 8 weeks. So PPP1. For those of you who did not apply for PPP1, and there are a couple of reasons you could not have applied for PPP1. One is you were not an eligible business type. Two is you chose to do the employee retention credit, right? And then three is you just chose not to do it because it was difficult or other things were going on or whatever. Now is time to do it. So you may have even turned down a loan after you were offered one. So this is going to provide 2.5 times your average monthly payroll for all employees making $100,000 a year or less. So the requirements: you can't be banned by any federal department or agency. You cannot be currently involved in bankruptcy. You can't be delinquent on any federal loan or have had a full-on default with a federal loan in the last 7 years. You can't be currently incarcerated or have pending criminal charges. No felony convictions just within the past 7 years. And the U.S. is your principal place of business. Your maximum number of employees for most businesses is 500. So you have to have 500 or fewer employees. If you're a housing co-op, a C6, or a visitors bureau, you have to have 300 or fewer. You have to need the funding to continue. And you can't use the PPP for the same expenses as EIDL or ERC if it's applicable. And you have to have been in business on February 15th of 2020, and you can't have closed. So you have to still be in business. You have to use the funds to continue operations and retain workers. You can't get the shuttered venue operator grant. Federal elected officials can't own more than 20% of the business, and the business cannot be publicly traded. Those are a few changes from the first round of PPP. I don't think they affect many of you at all. CDFIs already started taking applications on the 11th. So we've got a Google Sheet or a Google Doc that shows all the lenders we know of that are currently accepting applications. We're going to update that as new organizations come online, but you can apply for PPP 1 and 2 right now with CDFIs. We're expecting traditional lenders to start rolling out yesterday and on through the next couple of weeks. I don't know if any that are live right now, so I'd love it in the chat if you've talked to your banker and they are taking applications, if you go ahead and let us know. Here's the link. Again, I'll put it over into the chat for how you can find a lender, and we'll constantly update it with new information. And we've put in step-by-step instructions. The SBA actually is, so the SBA has already released PDFs of the applications for PPP 1 and 2, and they're each one page. So they're super easy. And that's all the information the SBA wants from your bank. So regardless of the sheets they have you filling out on an online template, what they're going to be going into is a PDF. And so we've linked those up and given you instructions. And so you can have everything filled out ahead of time, ready to put into any lender's application process. So that's PPP 1. A lot of the regulations around PPP 2 are the same. So you may now apply for PPP 2 if you already received and expended PPP 1, or you will soon have it expended. And you've had that 25% reduction in quarterly or annual income from 2019 to 2020. They've tried to make it a little bit easier. So for some of you who do not have in-house accounting teams or outsourced accounting to do the calendar quarters, if you have financials that show that you had a 25% reduction annually, they're going to assume that one quarter was down and you qualify based solely on that. It's 2.5 times your average monthly payroll up to that $100,000 a year, or for hospitality businesses, 3.5 times. So here's an example of a business. And again, we're looking at the quarters by calendar. So this is January to March, April to June, July to September, October to December. These are their 2019 revenue numbers. This is only revenue. This is not net, and this is not expense. So you're just comparing revenue to revenue in calendar quarters of 2019 to 2020. As you can see, for this particular business, they had a 17% slide in that first quarter, but then that April to June quarter, when most of the closures were happening, they had a 33% slide. If you look at their annual revenue, it's actually up. They had a better 2020 than they had a 2019, and you think, well, how can they get PPP2? Well, I'm telling you, the way the regulation's written, it's one or the other. If you have one quarter that was down 25%, you qualify. Or if you're down annually 25%, you qualify. So you've got to get with your financial team, or if you keep your own financials, you've got to lay them out by calendar quarter, and you got to look. And so even if you're thinking, you know, I actually had a pretty good 2020, don't stop there. Go back and lay out your financials quarter by quarter, because it may well be that even if you were up for the year, you qualify for this program for PPP2 if you just have that one quarter that was down. So you have 3 options to maximize your payroll. I told you that the PPP2 is going to pay 2.5 to 3.5 times your payroll, but they've given you a little bit more flexibility in how you calculate that payroll period. You can do the most recent 12 months, or you can do 2020, or you can do 2019. So you need to figure out which of those 3 options you had the most payroll expenses incurred, because you're going to want that period divided by 12 times 2.5, and that's going to be your reward. If you use a payroll service provider, they should be able to provide you with custom PPP reports. Almost all of them have built that in already. For sole proprietors who sometimes get tripped up, payroll tends to be equal to your profits on Schedule C. That's what, that is your profit less all your operating expenses. And if you're the only employee, you're the sole proprietor, that is your payroll number. I mentioned the forgiveness had gotten a little bit more flexible. So one of the things that hasn't changed is you still have to spend 60% of the award on payroll and only 40% on other expenses. But they've dramatically expanded the other expenses that qualify. So for the 40% that can be spent on non-payroll expenses, you can do mortgage interest, rent, utilities, operating expenses that are necessary for the continuance of the business, any damage that's been sustained to the property and repairs, suppliers that are necessary for the operation of the business, and any worker protection equipment. So that's a pretty good list of, I mean, that covers almost everything you need to operate your business. And then the other 60% has to be spent on payroll for employees. Now, the application for forgiveness has to be published on January 20th or before January 21st by the SBA. So we don't have it yet. But the law requires SBA to give an 8 to 24 week period for the business to incur eligible expenses. So we expect that all of you are going to have plenty of time to be able to expend these awards on eligible items as long as you're continuing to operate. The law also guarantees that for loans of $150,000 and less, which is almost all of you, you're going to get a simple one-page forgiveness application. That is a guarantee in the law. SBA doesn't have any discretion about that. Larger loans are going to have more extensive application and more attachments required. So some of the common issues we know that are going to trip you up as you do this. One is you got to know the date that your business was formed. That's maybe not something you have top of mind. Here's a link to the Secretary of State's website that's going to help you search that. It's also going to remind you about the legal method that your business was organized, whether it's an LLC, an S Corp, C Corp, whatever. Another thing you're going to have is that NAICS code. So I told you earlier on that hospitality businesses were going to get 3.5 times. And you think, well, how do you determine if you're a hospitality business or not? It's through your NAICS code. Some of you may know that. If you don't, there is a function to search those codes. And then you're going to have your EIN. So hopefully you know what your EIN, your tax identification number is. If you're sole proprietor, that's your social security number in most cases. But here's a link to the IRS website to pull up that EIN. And then a link to our directory of PPP lenders that we'll keep updating. And we've also done a Google Doc with line by line, step-by-step instructions for filling out the applications for PPP 1 and 2. So what are your next steps? If you're eligible, I need you to apply. Emily's smiling. It is really critical. I wish you could sit in my seat, but I can't tell you how many businesses have come in to see us and they were doing okay a year ago and now things are tough. Or 6 months ago, things were doing really well. They were above their sales from 2019 and now things are tough. There's no telling what Congress is going to do next. And this is the aid that's available. And so if you qualify, I need you to take it. One other thing I need you to think about, you may be thinking, I'm doing great. I don't need any government money. I can do this on my own. Well, let me tell you, your competitors are going to take this if they qualify, and it's going to leave you at a disadvantage. So if you qualify, I need you to take everything you qualify for. And it's difficult, but we're here and we're free. So if I can help you get through these applications, if you run into a stumbling block, if there's a question you can't answer, please let us know. Don't stop until we've got this money in your business's bank account. We will also continue to update you as the regulations are finalized. You can get individual coaching from us. And then we'd love to get updates from you. So as you navigate this process, if you can tell us tricks or quirks or contact information for individual banks, or all of you have super unique situations. So if there's something that comes up that's particular to your business type, if you'll let us know, that would be great. As you get approvals or loan awards, let us know. Anything you can do, we tend to be the point of the funnel. So all of you are calling us. And the more you can tell us about what's going on, the more we can help spread that information to your fellow business owners. And the last thing I'll say is you can do it. This is not fun. It's not easy, but you can do it and it's worth it. So I believe in all of you and I want you to succeed. So we'll start doing some questions now. So the first question I've got is from Whitney. For the February 2019 open, does that mean you actually had to be open to the public if you had payroll during that period? I'm going to have to do a little more research about that. I got a question yesterday from somebody who did not have payroll yet, but had it soon thereafter. I think if you had payroll, you're probably going to qualify if you had payroll on that February 15, 2019, but I'll go back and read the specifics of the law. The next question was, if you received EIDL last year, what impact will that have on your ability to receive PPP2 or EIDL grant? If you received less than that, $10,000 first EIDL grant. Okay, so one of the important things to note is as you're calculating revenues, remember it's revenues only. You do not have to count your pandemic benefits in your revenue numbers. So if you got PPP1 forgiven during that period in 2020, or you got the EIDL grant, you get to reduce those out of your revenue numbers for the calendar quarter where they came in. So that does not count against you in looking at revenue 2020 versus 2019. And the next question is from Macon Little Theater. Does the new shuttered venue grant exclude you from PPP2? Yes, it does. So again, the things to think about there on the shuttered venue grant, it's a limited amount of money. And the first round of applications is going to go to businesses whose revenues are down 90%. If your venue's revenues are down 90%, no question, you should do the shuttered venue operators grant and not PPP2. The next question was from Whitney, should we count community grants and revenue? Yes, I believe you do have to count those. It's only the federal relief programs that are excluded from the revenue calculations. Basically, everything else gets included in your revenue numbers. The next question, if I received both PPP and EIDL last year, but have not signed the final papers on EIDL, should I send it back since we have to repay it, then take PPP2, so no repayment required? I would take it all. My advice to you is to take everything that's out there. The EIDL, we are lucky that it's been extended, but who knows if it will be extended or offered again, and we don't know what's coming next. And it's a 30-year loan at an incredibly low interest rate. And there's no prepayment penalty either. So if we get to 2022 and things are going great, that's when I would advise you to pay back the EIDL. Every situation is unique. I am not an attorney. I am not a CPA, and I certainly don't know your individual business. But in general, I would say if you qualify for these programs, to take it. We're not out of the woods yet. And especially downtown, we normally have y'all know, for those of you who've heard, January, February, March, usually pretty slow until cherry blossom rolls around. So think about it already being slow. And now the pandemic's at its peak. It's going to be a tough couple of months. So my advice is if the money's out there, take it.
Josh, can I tag on the EIDL after you answer
yeah, sure. Let me answer this follow on. You can get both EIDL and PPP2. Absolutely, no question. EIDL and PPP2 are good. So you should be getting EIDL, PPP1, PPP2. And then most of you should also be getting the employee retention credit from last year and for this year. You can do all those things together. Really, the only thing you can't do now is that shuttered venue grant. So as long as you don't have the opportunity for the shuttered venue thing, you're probably doing all 5 of the others. Go ahead and jump in, Bethany.
Okay, so Lawrence, if that award has been held in suspense for longer than 6 months, then you're going to run into a brick wall. And the other thing that we know is that a few folks were offered the EIDL loan and declined it because they didn't think they needed the assistance and they didn't want a loan at the time, but are now realizing, like Josh said, for all those reasons, it is the cheapest money you can get besides a grant to finance and keep you held on. And you know, we're seeing people who denied it who are sorry that they have. So we do, though, have a contact through our Macon SBDC office and the state SBA office. So I'm going to type my email in here. But if any of you it's been longer than 6 months since you've held the loan in suspense, or if you were awarded it and declined it, please contact me directly so we can get you connected. Many of you know one of the issues with these programs is they're so overloaded and overwhelmed. They're not obvious outlets for how you get these questions solved and remedied. And we do have an avenue for that for all of you. So please follow up on that. And if you were denied within the last 6 months, we also encourage you, because they may change some of their parameters. This has not been totally indicated yet, but if you were denied in the last 6 months, we encourage you to contest that and use our Macon SBDC contacts to see if you can still remit an award. So I'll put my email in there and I'll get you in contact with that. But that's really important for any of you who can pursue that to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the specific issues that we'd love to try and help you with. Is if you have really specific issues around EIDL, we'd love to help you with that. But we definitely believe that you should take it. NewTown's, for instance, I think was $150,000. The monthly payment's $600, and it doesn't start for a year. So we haven't even started making payments. So it's just a really cheap security blanket to be prepared for whatever's happening next. If you end up keeping it for a year and you end up keeping it for 2 years, you only end up making 1 year of payments, and it's a few $100 a month for you to have access to 150 grand, 200 grand, 50 grand, whatever it is, to have that cash sitting in the bank to know that you can solve a problem really quickly, really cheaply without endangering your ability to survive. The challenge right now is when that obstacle comes up that you didn't see coming, where you normally could have turned for access to capital, like your banks, small business lending departments, probably not lending. And if you're already in a problem, it's not a good time to apply for money. And most small business loans are a term of 5 years. And this is a 30-year loan from EIDL. So I just would advise to take it and keep it and hold it. Now, somebody also just chatted me privately to say that Square and PayPal said that if you got EIDL, they will not let you apply for PPP2. That's a lender-specific prohibition. And so all you've got to do in those cases is go to a different lender. And I posted the list of the lenders we know that are taking applications on both programs right now already. And I just posted a link to the slides too. I see a couple of you already looking at them. Any other questions?
I think there was one from Whitney you might have missed. Do you think it would be possible to qualify for EIDL if we had payroll in February?
Yeah, again, I'm going to, Bethany, Emily, help me remember those, and I'll look into that specific date issue for Whitney. My bet is yes, because you got an EIN and you've got payroll activity. And so my bet is that you're going to be in good shape on both. Next question was,
Josh, you should address people who maybe were not lenders or small the first time.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I don't know that we ran into anybody because we sort of rammed them through. But if there was anybody who was going to get a PPP the first time and it was $1,000 or $2,000 or something really small, the way the first round of PPP was set up, the banks got a 5% fee. And so it was so little money, it was not worth them processing really small loans. To fix that, the new act set a floor of, I think, $2,500 per loan. So even if a lender processes a loan for you that's $1,000, the lender's going to get $2,500. So they have a big incentive to process every PPP loan this time. It may seem like a small amount of money, but I know for each of you, $1,000 for free is helpful and sometimes necessary in the difference between surviving and not. And now you're going to be able to do PPP1 and PPP2. So even for people with really small amounts of payroll, if you're a sole proprietor who was having startup, you didn't have a lot of profits, it's still going to be worth you doing both these programs. And it's going to be worth it to a lender to get you the money this time too. Wes said, if you apply for the shuttered venue grant and they run out of money before they get to your eligible, is there still a chance to apply for PPP2? Yeah, I absolutely think so. I don't think there's anything explicit that says that, but it's you can't get both awards. So if you're eligible for anything and you can hold out long enough to see if that money lasts, that's probably the smart thing to do. The deadline on the PPP2 applications, does anybody else remember when that is? I think it's the end of March. So as we get close to
It's
that
the
date,
31st.
yeah, it's the
It's
31st of March. So as we get close to that date, that's when you're going to want to start thinking about, okay, well, they haven't gotten down to me on shuttered venues on percentages yet. So let me go ahead and grab this PPP2 while it's out there. But you've definitely got some time to wait that out. Other questions? Well, those questions weren't too bad. I hope that's because all of you are already filling these applications out using these instructions and feel very confident about it. I just want you to know we're here. So don't let that be the obstacle. All of this is difficult, but you can do it and we'll help. And we're helping a lot of other people. So we may be able to answer your questions really quickly. So don't just let these things languish. Let's go ahead and get the applications in and get this money pumped into the businesses in downtown so that survive it when anybody miss out on something they were eligible for. And like I said, Whitney says the app instruction link isn't working. Let me try that. Oh, it's missing the P. Hold on, I'll post that one up again. Good. The other thing, Felicia just posted something. For those of you who got PPP1, we expect that one of the things that your lender is trying to do right now is trying to match up PPP1 with PPP2. So all you have to do is click a button to get your money. We expect for those of you who just went through and got your PPP1 that you're going to be able to go back to the same lender and really without doing anything, they're going to be able to port your application over once you say you need it. So that's probably going to get super easy as the rest of the banks come online. And so that may be something to think about. You can go ahead and apply with a new lender who's taking applications now, or you might give your bank or credit union a couple of weeks to see if they post something super slick with technology that makes it even easier. Okay, Scott asked the question, how hard is it going to be for those of us whose first lender isn't participating this time? Well, I don't think it's that hard. Like I said, Scott, the application the SBA's published is only 1 page long. So for you, like no doubt, I would say go ahead and go to the lender we have on the list now, which is Access to Capital for Entrepreneurs. That's a CDFI to Gainesville, Georgia. They're incredibly capable and competent. And I think they get a bonus for processing these over a bank, and they're live. If your lender is not going to participate in this round, there's no advantage to waiting out for that one-click technology solution. Go ahead and fill it out with whoever's taking applications now. Gwen asked, did I understand that we base our PPP on 2.5 times of employees that make $10,000 a year? No. So the PPP is based on 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. The only limit on that is employees who made more than 100 grand. So if somebody made more than 100 grand, you got to reduce them down to 100 before you divide by 12 to get your average monthly amount. And then you get 2.5 times that. If you don't have anybody who made more than 100 grand, it's super easy. It's just your 12 months of payroll divided by 2.5. This is really helpful. If y'all are thinking about any of these questions, somebody's thinking about it. So if you type it in, it'll probably help somebody else. Anything else? Great. Well, me and my whole team at NewTown, we will be here. We're happy to help. We'll do the research for you. We'll try and get you an answer quickly. Again, if you can just share with us as you go through this process, if you run into anything unique that we haven't covered here that we need to know about, it'll help us tune this up and help somebody else and make sure we're getting the right information out as quickly as possible. So let us know as this goes on if you need anything else. And like I said, look out for an email from Emily. We'll do something on the employee retention tax credit, hopefully next week, because all of you should be able to get that too. And it could be tens of thousands more dollars to help support you through this pandemic. It was good to see everybody again, and I look forward to talking to you if there's anything else we can do to help. Thanks.